everybody. I'm so happy to see all of you back here for day 2 of our Fonda Cafeteria Conference. We have 2 more sessions after this, and then a cooking demo tonight at 6 p.m. with Elizabeth High School. For that session, you don't have to register. You can just click the link to join. Tamika, I'm quickly going to ask you to mute from your phone. I think you press *6. Yeah, so we would love to have you join for the rest of our sessions today. And I think we're going to get started with this morning's presentation on local procurement. Quickly though, I do want to add that we have created a virtual bulletin board, and I'll share that link with all of you in the chat about so that you can share any news or events that you have going on with our network. And additionally, if you have questions throughout this presentation, please share them in the Q&A box that you should be able to find on your toolbar. That's how we're going to funnel all questions to the speakers, and they'll answer after the presentation. So I want to introduce our speakers today. We've got Jessica Thomson from the USDA, Alicia Landry from University of Central Arkansas, who actually spent some time in Mississippi previously, and so she's still a Mississippi girl to us. And Tamika Walls. She is a postdoc at the USDA. So without further ado, I think we're going to go ahead and share their presentation.
Good morning. Before getting to our study, we would like to thank the conference organizers for giving us this opportunity to present some of our research to you today. My name is Jessica Thomson, and I would like to disclose that I am an employee of the USDA Agriculture Research Service, and the agency did fund this research. I'm going to talk about procurement of foods in 2 Mississippi Delta school districts. My co-authors in this endeavor are Dr. Tamika Walls with the USDA Agriculture Research Service and Dr. Alicia Landry with the University of Central Arkansas. I would be remiss if I did not give a huge shout out to Joanne Martin and Clara Adams, the school food service administrators for the Hollandale and Leland school districts. They graciously provided us with their school food procurement records. Also, Ryan Betts, formerly with the Delta Eats, was instrumental in facilitating our connections with Joanne and Clara. Without their help, this work would not have been possible. In Mississippi, the state with the nation's lowest median household income, more than 1/3 of children are overweight or obese. Agriculture is the #1 industry in Mississippi, employing approximately 30% of the state's workforce on nearly 42,000 farms. Hence, using the traditional agricultural strengths of Mississippi may offer a unique approach to addressing childhood obesity in this state. In particular, enhancing farm-to-school efforts may prove especially effective, as such initiatives can strengthen the local food system and ultimately increase consumption of local foods. Revised standards put in place for school meal programs increased the amounts of fruits and vegetables served, emphasized whole grain rich foods, required that only lower fat and non-fat milk be offered, limited calories, reduced saturated fat and sodium, and required that each student's lunch include a fruit or vegetable. School districts can facilitate meeting these new standards as local foods available via farm-to-school programs span the plate by the inclusion of fresh fruits and vegetables, grains, legumes, dairy, and animal protein. The incorporation of fruits and vegetables is particularly important because Mississippi children consume less than 1 daily serving of fruits and vegetables, well below the recommended 2 to 5 daily servings. This alarmingly low fruit and vegetable intake puts Mississippi children at increased risk for nutrient deficiency, thereby potentially leading to obesity, cancer, chronic diseases, and even premature death. Now, previous research conducted by Dr. Landry in Mississippi involved asking child nutrition directors and farmers about their participation in farm-to-school activities. The most frequent barrier reported by child nutrition directors for non-participation was accessibility of local items, followed by cost, unsureness of the bidding process, and inability to purchase the quantity needed. Local farmers reported that they did not sell to local schools because of a perceived inability to produce enough goods to supply schools and an inability to package and transport produce to schools. These results indicate that to facilitate successful participation in farm-to-school activities, more information needs to be provided to child nutrition directors and farmers concerning local opportunities and resources available to them. Thus, the reason why we collaborated on the current study. Our objective is to present food procurement amounts, weight, and cost in 2 Mississippi school districts in hopes of illustrating potential economic and agricultural impacts of purchasing local on the state. Our procurement data came from the Hollandale and Leland school districts. Leland participates in the USDA Fresh Fruit and Vegetable Program. Data came from 2 academic years, 2018 to 2019 and 2019 to 2020. Foods were coded and classified into 8 categories: fruits, vegetables, grains, protein, dairy, added sugars, fats, and miscellaneous. I will present the Hollandale data first, followed by the Leland data. This graph shows the percentage amounts of the 8 food categories purchased by the Hollandale School District in the 2018-2019 school year. The green bars represent the percentage of total expenditures for each food category. The blue bars represent the percentage of total weight for each food category. As you can see, fruits and vegetables each accounted for approximately 14% of expenditures and 14 to 17% by weight. Grains and protein combined represented approximately half of expenditures, while dairy accounted for almost 40% by weight. The fruits category consisted of 12 different items. You can see that 2 items combined, apples and juice, represented almost half of expenditures, while juice alone accounted for 50% by weight. I will pause for a moment so that you may study the graph. The vegetables category consisted of 18 different items. You can see that 3 items combined, potatoes, tomatoes, and corn, represented approximately half of expenditures and half by weight. Again, I will pause for a moment so that you may study the graph. This graph shows the percentage amounts of the 8 food categories purchased by the Hollandale School District in the 2019-2020 school year. Changes from the previous school year were small, less than 5%, with fruit percentages increasing slightly and vegetable percentages decreasing slightly. I will pause for a moment so that you may study the graph. Similar to the 2018-2019 school year, 12 different fruits were purchased in the 2019-2020 school year, with only one difference between years. Cranberries were purchased in the 18-19 school year, while kiwis were purchased in the 19-20 school year. Also similar to the previous school year, you can see that apples and juice combined represented half of the expenditures, while juice alone accounted for over 50% by weight. I will pause for a moment so that you may study the graph. In the 1920 school year, 17 different vegetables were purchased, one less, jalapeno peppers, than the 1819 school year. You also can see that potatoes, tomatoes, and juice combined represented approximately half of expenditures and half by weight. In the previous school year, it was potatoes, tomatoes, and corn. Thus, the difference between years was juice in the present year and corn in the previous year. I will pause for a moment so that you may study the graph. Now let's turn our attention to the Leland School District, which participates in the Fresh Fruit and Vegetable Program. This graph shows the percentage amounts of the 8 food categories purchased by the Leland School District in the 2018-2019 school year. Again, the green bars represent the percentage of total expenditures for each food category, while the blue bars represent the percentage of total weight for each food category. As you can see, fruits and vegetables each accounted for approximately 10 to 13% of expenditures and 9 to 11% by weight. Protein and dairy combined represented over half of expenditures, and dairy alone accounted for over 60% by weight. The fruits category consisted of 18 different items. You can see that 4 items combined, apples, mixed fruit, oranges, and pears, represented over half of expenditures and over half by weight. I will pause for a moment so that you may study the graph. The vegetables category consisted of 20 different items. You can see that 3 items combined, potatoes, greens, and corn, represented approximately half of expenditures, while potatoes, greens, and tomatoes represented almost half by weight. Again, I will pause so that you may study the graph. In this graph, you see the percentage amounts of the 8 food categories purchased by the Leland School District in the 2019-2020 school year. Changes from the previous school year were small, less than 5%, with some notable exceptions. Fruit expenditure and weight amounts increased by 7% and 11% respectively. Vegetable amounts only increased slightly. Grain expenditures and weight amounts increased by 7% and 6% respectively, while dairy expenditures and weight decreased by 15% and 27% respectively. I will pause for a moment so that you may study the graph. In the 2019-2020 school year, 16 different fruits were purchased, 2 less than in the 18-19 school year. Lemons, plums, and watermelon were purchased in the 18-19 school year, but not in the 19-20 school year, while cherries were purchased in the 19-20 school year, but not in the previous school year. You can see that 3 items combined, apples, juice, and oranges, represented over half of the expenditures and over half by weight. This differs from the previous school year, in which apples, mixed fruit, oranges, and pears represented over half these amounts. Thus, the differences were juice in the present year and mixed fruit and pears in the previous year. I will pause for a moment so that you may study the graph. In the 2019-2020 school year, 19 different vegetables were purchased, 1 less than in the 18-19 school year. Cauliflower, celery, and radishes were purchased in the 18-19 but not the 19-20 school year, while beans and juice were purchased in the 1920 but not in the previous school year. You can see that 3 items combined, potatoes, tomatoes, and greens, represented over half of expenditures, while potatoes, tomatoes, and legumes represented over half by weight. This differs from the previous school year in which potatoes, greens, and corn represented approximately half of expenditures, while potatoes, greens, and tomatoes represented almost half by weight. Thus, the differences were tomatoes in the present year and corn in the previous year for expenditures, and legumes in the present year and greens in the previous year for weight. I will pause for a moment so that you may study this graph. The amounts of fruit procured for both schools and academic years combined were almost 150,000 pounds and close to $120,000. For vegetable, procurement amounts were over 100,000 pounds and almost $90,000. Summarizing our results, we found that changes in the percentage amounts of food categories were generally small, with the exceptions of fruits, grains, and dairy for the school district participating in the fresh fruit and vegetable program. For both school districts, there were few changes in the variety of fruits and vegetables procured between the 2 school years. Finally, the amounts of fruits and vegetables procured for the 2 years combined is substantial. Thus, procuring at least some of these fruits and vegetables from local sources could have a positive impact on the local economy. Which brings us to an important question. Can produce procured by these school districts be grown in Mississippi? The easy answer is yes, for all the vegetables and most fruits, but issues such as seasonality, volume, profitability, and processing need to be considered for schools to purchase produce from local farmers. Engagement of school administrators with local producers is necessary for bringing about mutually beneficial effects on school nutrition programs and local agricultural economies. So what does it really look like to feed school children locally procured fruits and vegetables? Let's suppose, and this might be ambitious, that you want to feed 500 school children at least one locally procured fruit or vegetable each week. Given serving sizes are 1 cup, and there are 180 school days per year spread over 40 weeks, we calculated the following estimates. Greens, at least some type of variety, are available throughout the entire school year, that is from August through June. So if you were to feed school children fresh greens, that amounts to 4,000 pounds. If you were to feed school children cooked greens, that amounts to 20,000 pounds. For sweet potatoes, assuming that the feeding period is from September through November, that amounts to 6,000 pounds. For strawberries, assuming the feeding period is March through April, over 1,000 pounds. For watermelon, assuming the feeding period is from August through October, over 3,000 pounds. And finally, for blueberries, assuming that you're feeding school children in May, that amounts to 1,000 pounds. Here's our contact information, as well as a map of the Delta Human Nutrition Research Program's location in Stoneville, Mississippi. We would love to get your feedback on the research we've presented today, as well as discuss opportunities for collaboration. I would like to close with a quote by a Louisiana celebrity chef whose specialties were Creole and Cajun cuisines. Paul Prudhomme said, "You don't need a silver fork to eat good food." And with that, I thank you for your time and attention today.
Thank you so much, Jessie, for that presentation.
My pleasure.
So now we want to open up the floor for questions. So if anyone in the audience has a question, please feel free to shoot it in the Q&A box. I have some in the chat I'll send that over to you, Alicia.
Okay, so first question, what do you think would be good changes that the USDA could make to support local purchasing?
So that's a tricky one because as a USDA employee, we're not actually allowed to comment on policy. But having said that, I think they could make it easier for school districts to purchase locally. Now, how that would look, I really don't know. And I have to say that I'm kind of a newbie in the school food arena. I'm actually an analyst, a statistician who works in nutrition and obesity, but got interested in this through working with Ryan and Alicia. So I am sure there are things that USDA could do to make it easier for the schools. And I think it probably has to happen with how they allow schools to do their procurements.
I'll chip in just a little bit there too, as I feel like with just encouraging and being open about from things filter from the top down. And so at the top, at the USDA level, saying we're encouraging this, we're supporting it, we want you to do this. I feel like with some of those farm to school grants, they have to kind of put their money where their mouth is in some ways, because they are funding so much through farm to school grants, while there definitely could be more done with training and encouragement. And Jesse, I feel like I can have an opinion a little bit more because I'm not a USDA employee. And so, I don't know if any of the other panelists have thoughts on that question, but, I guess my biggest takeaway for that question is supporting from the top down and being very public and very open about promoting the need to buy locally.
Well said, Alicia.
Okay. So let's see. Can you talk about some states who have offered incentives at the state level for local purchasing? And then kind of the question I think that goes with that is our State Department in Mississippi, the State Department of Education procures Mississippi grown Department of Defense or DoD fresh program. So what are the pros and cons of doing local procurement this way?
Those are great questions. And it's really unfortunate that Joanne couldn't be on the call because she really would be the person to answer those questions. That's outside my area of expertise or knowledge. So I would have to defer to someone who's actually on the ground using, those services to purchase food for their schools. So unfortunately, I cannot answer those questions.
I just want to add, Joanne Martin, we had hoped that she would be on today. She's the child nutrition officer at the Hollandale and Leland schools. And unfortunately, she couldn't join us, but she's doing great things in the local procurement realm for her school. And if you have any questions for her, I'm sure I can ask her if I can share her contact with you all to ask.
Thank you, Sydney. And one other thing I wanted to throw in with the Mississippi purchasing local items and then offering them through DoD and through the state purchasing cooperative is I think that sometimes people don't perceive them as local because they come from the state cooperative. And so they might be marked as local on the item list and things, but, my experience is outdated with in Mississippi by a few years, but when we were working closely with directors there, they would sometimes have a hard time identifying which ones were local and which ones weren't. And then also I feel like from the farmer side of it, there was kind of maybe I wasn't completely familiar with it, but maybe a bit of a barrier of perception about selling to such a large, into such a large procurement. So the next question is, what are some good, easy products that schools could try farm to school with?
These are really great questions. And again, yeah, I'm an analyst, so I don't work actually in, I'm not involved with purchasing foods for schools, so I don't know the answer to that question either.
From your data, it looked like Joanne was able to purchase a lot of potatoes. I saw that was really high in sweet potatoes. So just judging from Jesse's data, I think that would be a good place to look there to see what she purchased the most of in bulk.
And I do know that there's a processing plant in Marks that works with, small farmers, and they do a lot of greens. I know that, they do like fresh frozen with the greens. And I think they work with purple hull peas too. So, I think working, finding out what processing plants that are close to you, because I know sometimes like actually packaging it and that to get it to the schools or cleaning it can be an issue. So, contacting local processing plants to see what they're actually producing would be probably a really good place to start as well.
Yeah. Dorothy and Sunny, you may know this too. We have a contact for that processing plant in Marks. It's run by Alcorn State. And so we'll be happy to share that with everyone in the audience. They are a great place to start. Thanks for that suggestion.
I wanted to add a little bit too, if that's okay, Sydney.
Please.
On the so where to start with, something that's not counted in like the fresh fruit and vegetable program are herbs. And so I feel like herbs are generally really easy to grow, and you can't really get reimbursed for those if it's coming through the FFVP. And so that might be a way to just dabble to start with, even in like windowsills. But if, when you're wanting to move beyond like gardening at the school level and actually into farm to school, one thing that we always really promoted was the harvest calendars, because then you can see, you should start initiating those conversations a year in advance of what the farmers need and talk to them about, this is how much or how many sweet potatoes we bought last year. Would you be willing to grow that and earmark it for us? Or, just starting those kind of conversations. But I would definitely say, look at the harvest calendars for your USDA region, and then like narrow it down to what's in your area. Yeah, and I see somebody in the chat said watermelons are a great way to start. One thing I did want to mention along those lines too is something that came out of this data I really feel like is important for us to consider is how much money and how much more local food could be used if we did summer processing. So like if tomatoes and bell peppers are coming up in June or July or August and school's not in session, can you pay a couple of cafeteria workers or employees to come in and can tomatoes or can squash or freeze peppers and onions for a frozen mix later on? There are a lot of other things you have to consider, like storage space and who's going to pay during the summer and those things. But if you're really committed to using those local products and supporting the local economy, that might be a way to get more and more involved and get those farmers some support during the summer season too.
And, just looking at the
Oh no, we lost Jessie.
mustard, yeah. There was another one. Thyme, all sage is on there too. So the schools are using, those herbs that can be grown, like you said, in a windowsill or, or maybe even gotten from farmers who specialize in herbs. But yeah, that's another good way
You
to
cut out for
get
a
your feet wet, I
minute.
suppose.
You cut out for a minute, Jesse. What were you looking at?
Oh,
We heard
the
you talk about
herbs,
the herbs.
when Alicia mentioned, oh, okay. Oh, yeah, so just maybe another easy way for a school to like get their feet wet or like dabble into the arena of trying to purchase local or even growing their own.
Yeah. And so we've already touched on this a little bit, but one of the questions was, how do you suggest a school gets started in local procurement? You guys just listed some great things, but are there anything else that you guys would recommend for people who want to have never done this before and can just get started?
I would, just say to find a farmer and, the farmers know one another and what they do and how they, and I feel like, especially within the farming community in Mississippi that grows these types of foods, they're very supportive of one another. I mean, there is still competition because you're supporting your family and your livelihood, but I do feel like there is a lot of partnership. And so, if someone reaches out and says, hey, we want sweet potatoes, and then the farmer that you're talking to says, well, I don't grow sweet potatoes, but here's somebody who does. I think it's, one battle has always been the demands on the time for the child nutrition director, because they're meeting the needs of their school district, of their students, of their employees, and then they still have to have time for a family life. So to balance that and then ask them to do the footwork in finding farmers, one different farmer for every food that they want to procure is very burdensome. And so I think what Sunny and Dorothy and the team have done has been incredible in linking people together. So if, I guess, anyway, to summarize my blabbing, what I'm trying to say is that it is the personal contacts, I think, that are the main way.
And so the person who asked that question just clarified, and I know you said during like personal contacts, but she wants to know specifically about procurement methods. So I guess you just mentioned reaching out to farmers directly and forming those relationships. Is there another way that you would recommend people going about procurement? Like what kind of funds to use and maybe how to get funding for doing that?
I've thought Mississippi does a great job with their purchasing cooperative. Not all states are like that. And so in the states that aren't like that, I feel like it might be a little bit more of a challenge because you're on your own and your bidding process is done on your own. And if you're smaller, it's harder to get that bidding done. But, I guess being familiar with the purchasing thresholds. And so if you're purchasing below a certain amount, you don't have to go out for the requests, and those types of things might be where to start looking. It's just the regulations.
Hey y'all, I'm gonna add a quick note in here, and thanks so much for doing this session. I'm just gonna add a quick note about the specific of how you can do it. So in all states, if you are purchasing under the micro purchase threshold, which is $10,000, you don't have to do formal procurement for local products. So which boy would we love if some of our schools were purchasing over $10,000 from one farmer for their school nutrition programs. But the vast majority of purchases are going to fall below that, and you don't have to do your typical formal purchasing. You can fall under the micro purchase threshold, and you just have to be sure and document the purchase and how you found the product. And there's two other things I just wanted to mention in terms of like purchasing tools that you can use in Mississippi and beyond. One is a request for information, which actually Leland and Hollandale have just published. Request for information So this is just like, and we have I'll post it in the chat box in a minute. We have a resource for how to make a request for information, but it's just like this is our school district. This is the type of thing we buy. This is how many kids we serve and on. This is what we're looking for. And then farmers can come to you as long as you get the word out. And then the other great procurement tool you can use in Mississippi and beyond is a forward contract. So you can make a contract with a farmer in advance of purchasing the product, like when they're even putting seed in the ground, so that you can know what's upcoming and the farmer can know that that sale will happen in the future.
Thank you, Sunny. So our next few questions are related to farmer communication and farmer relations specifically. So the first one says, how do you feel this research, Jesse's research, may help facilitate farmer and food service connections?
So for me, we we have at our Stoneville location, they've started these field days. Last year was the first one they had where they bring in farmers because a lot of ag research is done in Stoneville. And so they bring in farmers just to kind of showcase some of the research that's going on, not only with plants, but animals too, especially like bees. That area is pretty big with the bee research. And so periodically they'll also bring in small groups of farmers to ask what sort of research would help them, make their farmer profitable, or what do they need to know about the crops and things like that. So there's already that sort of thing going on in Stoneville, but we would like to kind of bring the nutrition end of it in as well. So I am planning on presenting this research again at our next field day. That'll be in Stoneville, so that farmers can see, look how much produce the schools, they're not, I mean, I don't think that they're huge school districts, Leland and Hollandale, but look how much they're producing. This potentially is a really good revenue source that, if it works out, could be long-term. So for me, that's how I would like to use the data. I wanted to get it to this, the school nutrition directors, because maybe they know this, maybe they know how much the volume of what they're producing every year, but maybe they actually don't look at it grouped like that or with the different varieties. So I was hoping that there would be some takeaway there from the, for the school food service directors, but also on the farmer end as well, to show it to the farmers, look how much these schools are buying, and maybe there's opportunity for you there. So for me, that's how I would like for it to be brought to the farmers and how potentially they can use that information.
I
don't know if Alicia has more to add.
Of course. So I feel like there's three different levels of it, kind of the way I'd try to organize it. Like at the state agency level, I feel like it's really important for them to see this, just to know that there's 2 schools in the Delta that are not huge schools and how much they're using. Also looking at the utilization of like the fresh fruit and vegetable program and the differences in purchasing between the 2 schools. And then, so from kind of the state agency level, seeing that bigger picture. And then for the child nutrition and the local educational authority level is really, quantifying. So if your superintendent or an administrator is, why do you want these individual bids or purchases? Why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? That, you can show them these charts and tables and say, well, this is, our food program is $1 million program, or, we spend this much money into an economy somehow, and why not put it back in our local economy? And so it becomes a bargaining tool to say, this is evidence. We have evidence of the money that we're spending and the outcomes that we're producing. And really, this is good for our children. And so I think so that's the second. And then the third one is really for the farmer to be able to say, it's worth my time to grow sweet potatoes. It's worth my time to grow green peas, but maybe it's not worth my time to grow, I don't know, kiwis in a hothouse or something, you know? So like, I feel like it gives the farmer their evidence that they need to say, okay, it's worth me investing in these, this equipment or these tools, or finding a new method to produce. Or maybe it's, you know, if I can guarantee that I'm going to have 5 years of a purchase, then maybe it's worth me submitting a farm to school grant to get a new pea picker or a harvester. So, you know, I think that the information that is here, we can know it on some level because we're, you know, signing the checks or the purchase orders or whatever. But to see it in this format really tells us what our kids are eating and what our economy can support.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we've been talking a lot about how teachers can solicit farmers to get things from them, but we have a question from a farmer, and he says, I am a socially disadvantaged specialty crop farmer. He produces watermelons, cantaloupes, and cucumbers. Do you have any ideas on ways that the farmer can partner with his local school district to sell his product? And I do want to plug one thing here that we're planning for the spring, Morris. We would like to start some local networking sessions so that we can connect farmers with school systems and anyone else who wants to connect with people in their region. So be on the lookout for that, because we would love to start getting people better connected in their regions. But if you have any ideas, Alicia, please share them.
I have to jump on this. This is so exciting. And some of those pictures from the very beginning of the presentation were from a situation that was exactly this. And it's just so encouraging. And it's like Sam's, right? Or, you know, you bring a sample to the school and do like a can cutting with that director. And once they taste it, and once their staff taste it and see that you're interested, you know, it might take a little, you know, it's going to take a tiny bit of an investment on the front end, but they're going to connect that with you and see that you're invested in them and in their school and in their kids. And that right there means the world. And, you know, I think about, for the majority of child nutrition directors, you know, they don't do their job because they make millions. They do it because they're passionate about feeding children and changing the world. And so if they can see that a farmer wants to partner with them and it's going to benefit the farmer and that economy and the kids, it's a win-win-win. And so I guess, you know, my suggestion would be to take that step and put yourself out there and make an appointment with a child nutrition director at a school that you're interested in selling to, and take them samples of what you have to offer. You know, we did that in a town south of Hattiesburg. And once that director saw those sweet potatoes that were coming from 5 minutes away, she couldn't resist and wanted those over and over and over again. And I don't ever want to feel like it's all butterflies and roses after that, because there are challenges, you know, like you grow in sweet potatoes, they don't all come out the same size. They're not all the perfect portion, but that's when you can, you know, you can partner with someone that is available and start thinking about, okay, what are the recipes that we could provide, you know, to help the director get some other ideas about ways to serve these things, or ways to process them that doesn't take a ton of extra staff. So I guess, and I really like the idea of speed dating, you know, and so, you know, like Sydney is saying, we have opportunities for that. Speed date your directors and you know, put farmers and directors together and see what happens, because the synergy there can do amazing things.
Thank you. That was really exciting. And the next question we have is about micro purchasing. So Sunny, feel free to interject here too if you would like to. So she asked, do you have to buy from different farmers to do the whole micro purchasing thing? Because they have a farmer in Kentucky who is really enthusiastic about farm to school. And she's wondering if a school can do micro purchases from that farmer multiple times.
Yes, so I will put the memo for the micro purchase threshold for NSLP in the chat box here when I'm done. And since you're asking for Kentucky, Mackenzie, you do have to make sure that your state does not have a more restrictive micro purchasing threshold, because the state regulations will always trump the federal regulations. But I don't believe there is one in Kentucky, but don't hold me to that. So you can make multiple purchases from the same farmer under micro purchase threshold, but you would have to make it different products to keep it under the 10,000. And like generally what I've heard from USDA is like, don't abuse it. So like, don't use it so that you can get like past the limit. If you are purchasing over 10,000 from that farmer, it's worth it to do a more formal procurement method, because that just ensures to the school district and to the farmer that you're doing things properly and the right way. But yeah, you can buy different products at different times of the year and from the same person and go under that 10,000 limit. But yeah, hopefully that answered your question. I'll stick the memo in the chat box.
Thank you, Sunny. Do you guys have any more questions for our lovely speakers? Thanks for everyone who submitted. Those were wonderful questions. I mean, I feel like I learned a lot there. And we'll keep you all updated about the regional networking sessions. We're really excited about that. And I just wanted to thank USDA because their Farm to School program did fund this conference mostly. And we're really appreciative from that. Yeah, totally. And so Alicia and Jesse, do you guys have anything else to add?
I would like to add, I think the impact that COVID has had is going to be really interesting to see, and we hope to continue this. And, Ryan has worked so very hard with these schools to get the gardens going and different purchasing methods. And so watching this happen in real time is going to be so exciting. And, I just applaud the efforts of everyone that's working for Farm to School in Mississippi, because you guys have made such great strides in such a short amount of time. So thank you for allowing us to talk.
I second those things.
Great. Well, whenever you close out this window, you'll be brought to an evaluation survey. It's very short. We would love your feedback. And additionally, we will have a full conference evaluation that I'll send to you. Please tune in to our session on how to build a regenerative garden. That starts at 11:15. And then we break for a little while. And our final session on racial equity in Mississippi food system starts at 1:30. And don't forget, we have a conference wrap up after that 1:30 session. So if you're not able to attend that, please log on to that session at around 2:30 to hear from our wonderful co-directors.
Hey, Sydney, I'm going to add one last little note. Alicia, Jesse, Tamika, thank you so much for being with us today. We have Kenyatta Griffin in the Zoom too. She's our Farm to School specialist at Mississippi Department of Education and can be a great resource for anyone looking for more details that are Mississippi specific here. And yeah, thanks to the USDA for funding this conference this year. We have really awesome USDA reps out of the Atlanta office for our CRO region. So Miss Joy Nolan and Miss Samantha Benjamin Kirk have been on our team, Mississippi Farm to School, for a long time and are a great resource for those questions as well. Thanks, y'all. We'll see you at the next session at 11:15.